삼성,
三星
Samsung.
Welcome to East Asia, the depths of the field.
This is where it all began.
I'm Lee Kun-hee. We're talking about the overall history of Samsung, the electronic company. It's one of the biggest company in South Korea and semiconductor industry. If you ever owned a Samsung phone, TV, or a appliance that silently judges your life choices, you've interacted with a company that's basically everywhere, except somehow not literally your house. Samsung, how it went from a small trade shop in the 1930s to a global tech powerhouse by doing capitalism on what I can only describe as hard mode. You might think Samsung is a smartphone company or a TV company or that brand that somehow makes everything in my house except the house. But Samsung isn't just a tech brand. It's one of the clearest examples of how a country can go from post-war poverty to a global industrial powerhouse in a few decades. Through sheer stubbornness, strategy, risk-taking, and occasional corporate decision that sounds like it came from an action movie. I think we will get to the part where they literally burned phones, because nothing says quality management like a bonfire. Before Samsung, we need the world's fattest career crash course, so you're not like, why is every decision in this story life or death? Here's the compressed timeline. 1910 to 1945, Korea is anzacked by Imperial Japan. 1945, liberation, and soon after, the peninsula divides. 1950, the Korean War begins. So when you see Korean companies that feel relentlessly intense, it's not just the company culture, it's history. A lot of modern Korean business was built in an environment where stability was not guaranteed ever. And in the middle of this chaos, one ambitious businessman begins a career that eventually helps define Korea's economy. Samsung's founder is Lee Byung-chul, born in 1910. He studied in Korea and later went to Japan, enrolling at Waseda University, then left due to illness. It is said to be illness, but actually I think he just don't want to study. Not ideal, but also welcome to every entrepreneur origin story ever. I had a setback. Great. Now cue dramatic music. Back in Korea, Lee tried several ventures in 1930s. Rice milling, because processing rice for export was a big deal at the time. Transport logistics, because if you own the trucks, you control the costs. Land investment, growing fast with borrowed money. Land. It seems like lots of people still buying land now in Korea. For a moment, it worked. Then geopolitics happened. In 1937, the Second Sino-Japanese War begins. The economy shifts towards war. Credit tightens. Land prices crash. Lee's early-scale quickly strategy collapses. He goes broke. And here's the first big Samsung lesson. Samsung did not become Samsung by never failing. Samsung became Samsung by failing, then responding with better strategy. In 1938, Lee opens a trading business in Daegu, Samsung Sangho. Samsung means 3 stars, which is a bold name for a small shop, like calling your lemonade stand Solar Empire Holdings. He trees produce and dried seafood, exporting to China, and He adds basic manufacturing like flour and noodles because he's already thinking pure trading is fragile. And then World War II expands, and Korean business face heavy wartime controls and forced supplied demands. Samsung survives, but the founder learns something crucial in this part of the world. Stability is a luxury product. After 1845, Korea is liberated. Lee expands again, moves into larger-scale trade and builds Samsung's presence in Seoul. By the late 1940s, Samsung is becoming a serious trading company. Then, 1950, the Korean War begins. If you are a business, the Korean War is not a quarterly headwind, it's a national system crash. Commerce collapses. Infrastructure is destroyed and everything becomes uncertain. Samsung is hit hard again. But Lee restarts again. This time in wartime hubs like Busan, importing essentials like sugar and fertilizer, inputs and selling into markets that desperately need supply. And he notices a problem that will shape Samsung's future. When a country imports finished products forever, it exports its future. So Lee decides the path forward isn't just trade, it's manufacturing. In the early 1950s, Korea's government supports import substitution, building local industry so the country doesn't have to import everything at premium prices. Samsung leans in. Lee starts 제일제당, producing sugar domestically. Early on, customers don't trust local products because in countries with limited manufacturing, imported often equals better. But the sugar is good and cheaper. Over time, it wins. And here's the fun modern twist. 제일제당 later becomes part of a CJ group, now separate from Samsung, because Korean conglomerate family trees are complicated. Like if your family group chat has mergers and acquisitions. Also, Samsung builds 제일모직, aiming to produce decent wool fabric locally. This takes major capital, modern equipment, and foreign technology training. This phase matters because it shows Samsung's real identity. Samsung wasn't born as a glamorous tech innovator. Samsung was built as an industrial builder, patient, large-scale, and obsessed with execution. And we need one key term. A jabber is a family-led conglomerate that expanded across many industries during Korea's development era, often in close relationship with national industrial policy. Image if one company was simultaneously manufacturer, trading house, insurer, builder, and occasionally the main character of the evening news. That's the vibe. Korea's 1960s were politically turbulent. Regime changes, crackdowns, shifting rules. Large business groups could be supported one year and investigated the next. Samsung wasn't immune. A major controversy erupts in 1966 involving alleged smuggling tied to materials connected with the fertilizer product. Lee publicly steps down and transfers control of that fertilizer business to the state. Details remain debated in public history. Accounts differ. Later memories and allegations complete the picture, but as a listener, the takeaway is Samsung learns that scale is power and also visibility is risk. In 1969, Samsung enters electronics officially. Samsung Electronics is founded. Korea's electronics industry is still young. A rival Gold Star, later LG, already has momentum. Samsung is not first. Early Samsung products struggle with quality. It's a learning curve. But Samsung keeps building manufacturing discipline. TVs take off, exports grow. Samsung starts to look like a serious contender. And then Samsung makes the move that ultimately turns it into a global force, semiconductors, which is basically the corporate equivalence of I've learned to drive, now I will build my own spaceship. In the early 1980s, Samsung commits to memory semiconductors, DRAM. This is an industry where investment is enormous, technology moves fast. If you are late, you die. If you are early, competitors might slash prices and still try to kill you. Samsung starts with external design inputs but rapidly builds process know-how and develops successive generations 64K, 256K, 1 million DRAM and beyond. It isn't smooth. Samsung takes heavy losses early, but the company sticks with it because semiconductors aren't just a business, they are a strategic foundation. In 1987, founder Lee Byung-chul dies. Lee Kun-hee takes over as chairman. By the early 1990s, Samsung exports a lot, but in many global markets, Samsung is still seen as a low-cost brand. Then comes 1993, a pivotal meeting in Frankfurt. Lee Kun-hee said, "Change everything except your wife and children." That line becomes legendary. But what does it mean in business terms? Samsung pushes a cultural transformation. Quality becomes non-negotiable. Design becomes strategic, not decorative. Global competitiveness becomes the goal, not just the volume exports. Samsung adopts practices like stopping production lines if defects are found, because you can't marketing your way out of a product that falls apart. And yes, Samsung makes the point dramatically. Samsung's phone journey begins early, but the company struggled against the major global players. In Korea, Samsung leans into one competitive message, call quality. Important in a mountainous country where signal strength varies. Samsung's Korea mobile brand becomes any call. But globally, the smartphone era changes everything. Apple's iPhone helps redefine what a phone is. Samsung's early smartphone attempts on outside software platforms struggle user experience. Samsung engineer said, "Look, we can argue about software all day, but if our hardware is flawless, people will at least stick around long enough to care." Samsung goes all in on Android and launches Galaxy. And here's Samsung's hidden advantage: vertical integration. Samsung doesn't just assemble phones. Often, Samsung also makes memory chips, displays, and key components at massive scale. It's like competing in a cooking contest when your opponent owns the farm, the oven factory, and the supply chain, and somehow still has time to plate the dish nicely. Then 2016, the Note 7 battery crisis, global recalls, major losses, reputational damage. Samsung responds with stronger safety protocols and recovers. Because big companies don't avoid storms, they build better ships after they sink one. If you are new to Korea, here's why Samsung's story feels unusual. Most global tech giants were born in stable economies with huge domestic markets. Samsung was built while the country rebuilt from war, industrialized rapidly, compete globally with limited resources, and navigated tight links between state policy and big business. So Samsung grew with the survival mindset: move fast, scale hard, learn aggressively. Like many family-controlled conglomerates, Samsung's leadership succession has involved restructuring, controversy, and long-running legal disputes. Over time, pieces of the original Samsung empire slips into separate groups like CJ and Shinsegae through inheritance and reorganization. In the late 2000s, investigations and whistleblowing brought allegations of hidden funds and nominee-held assets into public view. Later, succession-related restructuring, especially around the 2015 merger between Samsung C&T and JR Industries, become deeply controversial with critics, alleging empire valuation and political influence, and supporters arguing it was legitimate restructuring. Multiple related legal cases has played out over years, with different rulings and appeals depending on the issue and time frame. The key point is this: Samsung isn't just a company that sells products, it's a major institution inside Korea's economy, which means corporate decisions can become national events. So how did Samsung become a world brand? There's 5 reasons. First, relentless reinvention. From trading to manufacturing to electronics to chips to mobile. Second, scale was strategy. Enter industries to become a top player. Third, manufacturing discipline. Use quality systems, process improvement. Fourth, long-term semiconductor commitment. Chips power everything. Fifth, brand transformation in the 1990s. Trust plus design plus global identity. And now we land the plan. Samsung began as a trading shop with an ambitious name, 3 stars. Today, those stars might as well be consumer electronics, semiconductors, and global brand reach that touches basically everyone who's ever touched a device. And yes, Samsung's story includes controversy and complex governance like many mega institutions, but it's also one of the clearest examples of how industrial strategy, relentless execution, and a willingness to bet big can transform a company and a country. Lee Kun-hee said, "If quality sleeps, the brand sleeps, and if the brand sleeps, everything sleeps." And if you remember nothing else, remember this: Samsung didn't win by playing safe. Samsung won by making expensive bets and then doing the hard, boring work to make them real. There could be some young people say that, so Samsung survived the wars, crisis, and the film bonfire, and I can't survive 5 minutes without a charger? That's the episode. If you want more stories like this, Sony, Toyota, TSMC, no need to tell me what to cover next. I will try my worst.